Hey everyone and welcome back to today's video. So today I'm going to be continuing with reviewing my reading goals, and in this video specifically I'm going to be talking about the essay collections that I read in 2020. I set myself a goal to read at least 6 essay collections and I'm happy to say that I smashed that. I ended up reading 9, so that's really good. So I will run you through the stats as I always do in the beginning, take you through some other interesting stats and then talk about the 9 books that I read. So as we know, in 2020 I read 95 books. This is 20 books up from the previous year. So of those 95 books, 9 of them, like I said, have been essay collections. So that means 9.5% of my reading has been made up of essay collections. Last year I read 75 books and 3/4, I don't know why it's 3/4, I mean I did watch that video but I can't remember now, were essay collections, so that accounted for 4% of my reading. So we're on the up. Like, I basically have increased this sort of percentage of essay reading up by 6%, which I'm really happy with. I really enjoy reading essay collections. Despite reading like 9 essay collections, I actually didn't get to as many of the essay collections like I had saved for myself this year, so I actually do want to probably say about the same. I do want to read a lot more different essay collections because there are so many that like were on my basket that I had in mind when I set this goal, and they're not the ones that I read. So some interesting stats about these books that I have read: 6 of these collections were written by women, 1 by a non-binary author, and 2 were from men. 5 of these essay collections were personal / memoir essay collections. 2 of the collections were heavily based on one theme, and 1 of these was focused on the life of a historical individual. And despite me saying how much I really enjoy reading essay collections, I only gave 1 of these books 5 stars. Like, to be fair, it's a range. They range from 1 to 5 stars, but only 1 got 5 stars. So let's talk about the books. I'm not going to talk about them in any particular order, except this might be in the order that I read them in because I've just taken them from my Goodreads, but we'll see. So the first one is What My Mother and I Don't Talk About. Now, I have spoken about this book at great length, like it has been mentioned countless times on my channel, mainly in the beginning of the year, and then I did speak about it in one of my last reading goals videos. But What My Mother and I Don't Talk About, it's actually 15 writers break the silence. So 14 of the essays are on people's complex relationships with their mothers. Purely, I'm not going to say purely negative, a lot of it quite negative aspects of their relationship, and the final one is a positive relationship with their mum and sort of exploring some sort of background with their mum. And essentially it's just 15 different writers, names that are kind of, I guess, bigger names now, at least to me anyway, would be people like Kiese Lehman, Andre Ackerman. There's another one, the author of the woman who wrote Long Live the Fatherless Tribe of Girls or something, and then there's also one by Maria Machado, who I know has written a couple of other non-fiction essays and maybe also a fictional book that was quite popular in 2020 or 2019. So there are some like popular names out there. The rest I probably just don't recognise because I don't recognise their stuff, but all these authors go into their relationships with their mother, and it's just covers a wide variety. It covers, you know, mothers that have mental health issues and how that sort of transpired in the life of the author that's talking to us. In the case of Andre Ackerman, he talks about the fact that I think his mother was deaf, but there's also the identity of like where she was born and just like the time that she was born in and how that sort of affected her growing up, and then later like their relationship. It's a really interesting essay collection. I gave it 3 stars because I just found that there were some essays, particularly in the beginning, that I just didn't gel with, and I was really close to like not finishing it. But then the more I listened to, the more I really enjoyed it. There were just some really fantastic essays in there. I think I also really enjoyed this on a very personal level because relationships with mothers can be so complex. Often we see really good relationships with mothers portrayed in media and books and things like that, or you know, you do see bad ones, but this was just pure non-fiction of people talking about such intimate details of the relationship with their mothers, and it was just a fascinating thing for me personally to see just because of my own personal experience. So it was an essay collection that I really enjoyed. I did do a video where I spoke about my favourite essays from that collection, so I will link that in the cards above, and I will also link it in the description box down below. Another essay collection that I read that I completely forgot to mention in my previous video when I did my non-fiction reading girls one is Wintering by Catherine May. Now, I did speak about this in a recent reads video, so I will also link that in the cards up below. This collection is like part essay, part memoir, I would say, and actually it's one I kind of want to reread now just because it's focused on wintering, so it's very much talking about the cold season and sort of the, I want to say, things that come with that, the kind, I don't even want to say cozy stuff, but other aspects that you associate with sort of winter. I'll read the blurb to give you guys a glimpse of what it's about. It says, how do you survive the wintering phase of your life? Wintering, the dormant periods in our lives, the dark moments we endure, which can be brought about through a myriad of different ways. From the death of a loved one to a sudden change in circumstances or mental health issues, can be lonely, damaging, and catch us off guard. Catherine May recounts her own year-long journey through winter and how she found strength and inspiration when life felt frozen. Part memoir, part exploration of a human condition, Wintering explores the healing nature of the great outdoors to help us overcome and embrace our own wintering experiences, and how, much like nature, we can learn to appreciate these low periods and what they have to teach us before the ushering in of a new season. And it's quite a varied collection, so there are points where she actually talks on other sort of traditions, so like traditions in Sweden, I think maybe traditions in like church, the sort of religious perhaps, or just kind of annual aspects of these things, the things that you come around and celebrate. And then there are some historical aspects where she talks about like wolves and the sort of link to winter and things like that. So it's quite varied in that context, that she pulls from different things in wider society, but then also pulls from wide personal things in her life. For example, like they say, mental illness. I think at one point her son is like not enjoying school or something, so she pulls him out of school for the winter. And I think she also lives in quite a remote place, and then I feel like maybe in those parts of the world winter feels a lot longer than it does in other parts. So it's quite a varied memoir. Again, this was one I gave 3 stars. Whilst I really enjoyed it, there are aspects of it, like the wolves aspect, and where she goes into bits of history about other things that I just felt were a bit overdone and not interesting personally for me actually either. But again, I did do a recent reads video talking about that, so I will link that video so you guys can hear more about my thoughts. A book that I don't think I have actually spoken about in great detail is Sensuous Knowledge, A Black Feminist Approach for Everyone by Mina Salami. This was a really powerful essay collection. I think I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I definitely need to give it a reread because I already know that I've forgotten most of the contents in here, but this was just such a refreshing read for me to read, if I'm honest. These are all just a collection of personal essays centered on different topics where Mina gives her own sort of thoughts and opinions. She does weave in like African mythology, she weaves in different schools of thoughts, all academic sources and things like that, but then offers her own take on these things and maybe how like these things need to be revitalized. It's a very, very interesting read. Like I would definitely recommend it to everyone. Actually, I was going to say some people, to everyone. Because I just really liked her thoughts. I liked her honest approach to a lot of things, and sort of, for me at least, how different they were to sort of the things that we hear in the media about how we should combat things. And that goes from things to sort of talking about blackness, talking about being African, talking about identity. And I think for Mina as well, identity is quite complex. I think she is half, I don't want to say this wrong, I know she's half Nigerian, and then it's either Finnish or Swedish. I want to say it's Swedish, it doesn't say at the back here. And I think she has lived in either Sweden and Nigeria and in the UK, specifically I think in London. So there's her thoughts on identity are actually very interesting. But I'll read you a little bit of the blurb so you can get an idea of a little bit more what it's about. It says here, in Sensuous Knowledge, Mina Salami draws on Africa-centric, feminist-first and artistic traditions to help us rediscover inclusive and invigorating ways of experiencing the world afresh. Combining the playfulness of a storyteller with the insight of a social critic, the book pries apart the systems of power, privilege that have dominated ways of thinking for centuries. And that is very much what she does. She touches on these things, explains them, but then offers new, fresh thought of how we can move forward and not just keep reiterating the past. It's actually really brilliant. But yeah, it says it puts forward a new sensuous approach to knowledge, one grounded in a host of global perspectives, from black feminism to personal narrative, pop culture to high art, Western philosophy to African mythology, together compromising a vision of hope for a fragmented world riven by crisis. And the chapters are simply titled really simple things. If I can find the contents page, I seem to have gone past it. Oh, here we go. So it says of knowledge, of liberation, of blackness, of womanhood, of sisterhood, of power, of beauty. And yeah, she touches on all these things and offers her own thoughts. I really enjoyed this. Like I said, I'm going to give it a reread this year for sure. So I hope when I give it a reread, I will be able to do a deeper dive for you guys and talk more about the contents of this book. The 4th essay collection I read is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. Now, when I did speak about this book in my What I Read During Pride Month video. At that time, as far as I knew anyway, George M. Johnson did identify as a man, but now I've since discovered they identify as non-binary, so that's my non-binary author that I mentioned previously. And I gave this collection 3 stars. This was a very interesting collection because it's mixed with the sadness of not being able to explore your sort of queer identity, mixing with such tight and wonderful family bonds. Like, sometimes when you read memoirs and you read memoirs that talk about queerness, it's just so sad. You hear so many sad stories of the unacceptance of them, and this was tinged with both of that, to be honest. It was unacceptance and there was acceptance, and it was just an interesting collection to read. In this essay collection they talk about a whole host of things, from like when they were younger and like getting into their first fight, to the sort of relationship they had with their grandma, family barbecues and family parties, but then talking about going to college and going to university. I think it would be high school and then college, because it's like different in America. I always get so confused despite watching so much American TV. I read The Birth of You, though I don't think it offers much more than I have explained, and I do talk about this book in more detail, so I will link it up in the cards as well. But it says here, Johnson explores it says his, but I'll say their childhood, adolescence and college years in New Jersey and Virginia. From the memories of getting their teeth kicked out by bullies at age 5, to flea marketing with their loving grandma, to their first sexual relationships, this young adult memoir weaves together the trials and triumphs faced by black queer boys. I did enjoy this essay collection. I thought it was quite varied. At some points I think I did find it a bit repetitive, and I just know I was listening to this as an audiobook. As I was listening to it as an audiobook, there were some bits that I just wish were a bit shorter, because I could feel myself just getting a little bit bored. But overall it was a solid essay collection. Another essay collection I read is this, How Prowess Can Change Your Life by Elaine D. Button. Yeah, again, I've done a recent read talking about this book. This is basically, and I think this book has been actually updated. I think the updated version says, you know, How Prowess Can Change Your Life, not a novel, so that people don't think it's a novel. Because I think perhaps when it was marketed, when it published, it on the basis of the front cover and the back, there's not even anything on the back, so that's bad. You just think it's gonna be a novel, but it's not. It's a non-fiction book. And it's essay collections basically talking about the lessons that Elaine Button thinks that we can learn from Prowess. Again, I have done a full video about this, so I don't really want to repeat everything that I have said before, because I think I've spoken about this book as well. It's cropped up a couple of times as well. But again, this was one that I gave 3 stars. I thought it was interesting. It wasn't what I expected, but there was still bits of it that I found myself engaging with, and I do think Elaine Button did a good example of showing like the sort of things that Prowess talked about and how they can be applied to modern day life. Another book I read is Dead Girls by Alice Boleyn, and again, this is not one I'm going to linger on because so many people know my thoughts on this. I've done a reading vlog on this. I talked about it in my non-fiction November. This is the only book that I gave 1 star out of my essay collections. All these essay collections were about LA and Joan Didion. The first essay is about surviving an American obsession of dead girls. The rest is not. So yeah, not my favourite, and it will definitely be something that once I start to like reorganise my shelves, I will be unhauling this book because I will never be reading it again. Another book, and this was the only book that I gave 5 stars, is I'm Telling the Truth But I'm Lying by Bassie Igby. This is an essay collection basically centred on mental health, so I think particularly anxiety and bipolar 2. I feel like this very much follows a chronological fashion, but it kind of isn't. But each essay is essentially focused on a different aspect of Bassie Igby's life and yeah, how they dealt with their mental illness. Again, this is one that I've spoken about in a non-fiction book, and I think maybe in a book haul. These are all personal essays which sort of range from sort of her love life to her relationship with her parents, to just career, just basically how those two things, mental health and anxiety and bipolar 2, sort of weave in with those things. I really love this collection. Like, I don't know how much more I can hype it up, but such a pleasure to read. Again, another book that I feel like I've spoken about at great lengths because I've done the book haul and because I mentioned it in my non-fiction reading goals video. But again, Heavy by Kiese Layman. This is a memoir in the form of an essay collection, and I feel like this is one of the books that I felt like reading it that actually, I don't know if it would have just been better as just a memoir and not have it do with any essays, because I feel again that this is quite chronological. We do start with him being a little boy and then him in his career and later in his career, so I just didn't understand why this wasn't just purely a memoir. Like, I honestly forgot that actually this was an essay collection, because I don't think that the essay, like, they focus particularly on just one topic per se, but you know, the contents page does order it in terms of you know, different titles for an essay collection, and it's split into 3 sections. So we've got Boy, Man, Black Abundance, Homework, Addict, Americans, and then each one just has their own title underneath. So for example, under boy man there is train, nan, wet, bee. And for me, like, I just felt like it could have just been chronological, but again, this was one I really enjoyed. This book is heavy. Heavy refers to the weight, so I think he struggles a bit with weight. I don't know if he still does, but also I think heavy applies to a lot of emotion that is in this book, and how reading this, like, you just feel completely weighed down. There is a lot. The book very much focuses on black mothers, but also black mothers and violence, and sort of level of violence that can be inflicted upon like black children, and that sort of culture of like beating your children. It covers so much more than that, but I feel like just when I look at the title, I feel the heaviness from this book. The final book is I Am Not Your Baby Mother, What It's Like to Be a Black British Mother by Candice Braithwaite. Again, this is one that I spoke about in my non-fiction November wrap-up, so I won't dwell on it too much. This is a series of essay collections from Candice. She is a black woman in the UK. I believe she was born in London and now resides in Milton Keynes. And this essay collection is really to do with her, essentially it starts off in the beginning with her life, and it does the aspects of motherhood it focuses on when she's younger, is talking about like being raised by her nan and like what her life was like with her mum, and then it sort of goes into her experience of motherhood, so that is getting pregnant, getting things for her baby, after she has her baby, and sort of, yeah, as her baby is like a toddler and things like that. I think she now actually has 2 children. Yes, no, she does, but this only covers when she has her first child. And she talks about like her experiences with the NHS, with other women, just like when she's been online and looking for things. And like, for example, being on Instagram and that sort of visibility of black women in those spaces and how it was lacking. She covers so much, but again, I have touched on this book quite a lot. This was such a pleasant read, especially because it focused on the UK. It was so nice to actually have something that talked about UK, especially something like black women and motherhood, because there's not that many stats and figures on it, so it was actually really interesting to read. And that is it for that video. That is it for the essay collections that I've read. So I hope those essay collections sort of maybe inspired you to maybe read some essay collections, or maybe you heard about something there that you would definitely like to read. I think they're quite varied, which I like my essay collections to be, and there are still many essay collections that I want to read this year. So that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in another video. Bye.